Hey Beth.
Hey, Erin, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. How are you?
Good. It is lovely to get to talk to you.
As always, I agree. So fun. So today, and this is like the start of a series. I've got
Oh, I love when we do series.
I know it's fun. The leave people hanging, like come back for more because, or it's just that like we actually have so much to say, can't squeeze it into a single episode. So I've got a series now on working with collaborators. And this started from a presentation I gave to the lab, because in our lab, we have, I think, an unusually high number of collaborations compared to most academic research labs. In part, that's because we are also partially a specialized service facility or core facility. So that certainly increases the number of collaborations that we have, but that's also kind of the nature of being a bioimage analyst. We are not working in the wet lab directly. We are not producing our own images. And so we end up in the position of helping lots of other people who are, and helping them get the best data out of their images. So lots and lots of collaborations. And so I want to talk a bit about working with collaborators, and what we have learned over many years of working with many collaborators.
Yeah,
So,
that seems incredibly helpful because
yeah,
people are always the hardest part.
yes. Yeah, so here we are, working with collaborators. So, when starting any collaboration, the first thing that I always want to think about, is why. Why are we doing this? Because this sets the stage for the collaboration. This really informs what the collaboration should look like. It informs what the collaboration, can end up being, and sort of helps you prepare for making the best of the collaboration and making everybody happy, on both ends. And so why being like, why did this collaborator come to you? Did they need our expertise? Is this something they are unable to do themselves? Did they come to us because they need it fast? Like maybe they could have done themselves, but they just like they got to get this project cranked out, and so like get it done. Or did they come to us because somebody told them they needed to, right? That the like somebody working hard and a boss is like, you know what? Like go talk to them, go do that thing. And so each of those different scenarios very much sets the tone for how the collaborator will be interacting with us and what they will be expecting from us. Also, important for us to keep in mind, why did we join this collaboration? Is it because they paid us money and we need money to pay the people in our lab? That's fine,
Sometimes we do.
right? Sometimes that's why.
Mhm.
Is it because we were told to? Or is it, like a postdoc in our lab? Did Beth and I go, hey, here, you need to do this, right? I mean, we try to make it a little nicer than just like do this thing, right? But like, is is this person doing it because they were told to, or are they doing it because they're really interested in the project? Maybe it's an area of biology that they're an expert in, or an area that they really want to grow into, and so they've asked to work on this collaboration. Um, oh yeah, that's the next bullet points. Is it a using an existing skill set that this person has, or is it driving the development of a new skill set? And again, both of those are going to inform what this looks like. Is this really a way to grow and learn and might be challenging and, and pushing comfort zones? Or is it, yeah, I got this. I can do this in my sleep. So once you've really thought about all those questions, it's really important to set shared expectations with the collaborator. So once you've thought through all these whys, expectations, like expectation setting, if you like take one thing away, one topic sentence from all three of this three-part series, it is set shared expectations. If you know what you're expecting and the collaborator knows what they're expecting, then like you set yourself up the best you can. So that like technically can be who is doing what in the collaboration. What is being done? When? When does this thing need to be done? How? What tools or methods? Who, what, when, how? And having a conversation with your collaborator at the start of the collaboration to set these expectations together. So diving into each of these just a little bit more, like who in this collaboration, who is a part of it? Is it just, the postdoc in our lab that is helping a postdoc in another lab? Or is it a bigger thing where it's an entire lab and a set of PIs or a group of labs and a bunch of RAs and postdocs doing the work and PIs chiming in? It's going to look really different depending on who's involved, both like who gets to make the decisions and who is driving the work. And that can often look very different depending on the dynamic that you have with your PI or your collaborator has with their PI or boss. And who's helping in the work. Is it just one lone postdoc doing their thing on their own? It is their own project. Or do they have a super talented RA that is also helping them and, a collaborating postdoc that is teaching them the technique, so there's knowing who is doing what is really helpful to understand from the very beginning. Um, and specifically, like who is doing what part of the work. So not just the decision making, but the work itself. So what will the data look like when it is handed to you? And who directly should you expect to get it from? That's important to know. Then when you're done with your work, who exactly should you be giving the data to? And you would think this would be obvious, but there have absolutely been situations, like especially the more people you have in the room, the more people you have coming into the collaboration, where different people have different ideas about what the handoffs are. So making very clear about what the handoffs are going into it can be really important. Um, what? So what exactly is being given to you? Um, is it already done? Or do you have a say on the acquisition? So this comes up a lot when either people involve us from the very beginning and say, hey, I want to run a pilot. I don't know how to set up this assay. Can you help me build and develop? And we do a lot of back and forth. That's great. That's the scenario we want to be working in. But sometimes people come to us and say, like, I have this data, I need it analyzed. We say to them, okay, but actually, that's not really going to work with the way you've set it up. And the answer is like, that's the data I've got. So do the best you can. But that's a really different conversation of what is the best I can get out of the data I've got because I can't get more data versus how can I get my best data from the beginning.
Yeah, those are super potentially different things.
Absolutely. And without knowing this from the beginning, there can be miscommunications and hurt feelings. If we don't know that somebody has no chance to get new data, like it doesn't feel good for us to go to them and be like, oh, this isn't any good. Let's try again. Right? Like, I mean, there's more to say about how one has difficult conversations, but um, again, expectations are important. Even knowing how will this data be structured so you can be prepared. How is the metadata considered or included? Is it going to be coming, as a separate spreadsheet that they send to you? Or did they not actually even think about getting you the metadata? And maybe we need to have a conversation about that. Knowing, can we ask for changes or Is this it? Also, the flip side of setting clear expectations about what we're delivering. So, are we giving them, do they just want the end results, the shiny, pretty, here's a figure for my paper? Or do they want all of the intermediates, all of the output files, all of the steps along the way? Um, how much should we be customizing the workflow? Do they want it to, we've had collaborations where it's like, hey, we just have a new batch and I need it run through the same pipeline as old batches because we want to be able to compare them as directly as possible. And we have collaborations that like, hey, tune this as much as you can to make it as best as it is for this exact batch of data. Neither is bad, but knowing what that collaborator wants, again, is very important from the beginning. Um, then also knowing kind of like what beyond the data, what is expected? Do they want documentation about what you did shared in a way that they can understand and write a paper? Or do they expect that you would write up the method section for their paper for what you did? Or is it just, no, just hand it back and they'll handle it? Because knowing, if they're expecting to come back a year later when they're ready to publish and say, okay, now write my method section, right? That's actually something that should be established up front because maybe the person in our lab who did the details of the handling isn't in the lab a year or two later when they want to publish. And if we knew it ahead of time, we could have asked that person to write that up before they leave. Um, when when is also really important. Um, when the data is coming to us. So do we know, like, is this a hard date? Like, you will send it to us by this day no matter what? Or is it, yeah, that's our best guess, but like best guess is, who knows? It's things happen in the wet lab. Will it be coming all at once or will it be coming in batches? That helps us prepare for how we're going to handle this. Um, when are they expecting data from us? Is it, is it a hard or soft deadline? Um, do our results actually impact their ability to collect future data, or is it just they want it back as fast as possible because they're excited? Um, because the like, I want it back ASAP is different than I actually need this back ASAP because I'm paused another experiment that I need this results from to be able to scale up. Those are really different scenarios, and we may handle the conversations about our ability to return data in a certain time frame can look really different based on those things. Um, and finally, here this how is this is this considered assay development? Are we working together to give them feedback about their wet lab role and then they're incorporating that and giving us a new batch and back and forth? Or is their data like, is this what it is? And there's nothing we can do. Um, Also, on the flip side, like, do the collaborators care about our methods? So is it something they need to be able to run themselves in the future? That can affect what software we choose, what languages we choose to code in if we're coding. Um, or, and it can affect, so all of these who, what, all of these conversations are kind of intermeshed, right? Like, but are they locked into a specific method, a specific tool? Or, hey, since we processed their first batch, it turns out that there's been a new version of a software that's come out that we think would be a lot better at this specific task. Can we try that? These again, important things to talk about. Um, Also, so once you've said all of that, something to keep in mind that you might want to directly communicate is you need to know the priorities. So things can be high quality, they can be reproducible, they can have, prioritize cost, or maybe a specific method or tool, or maybe as fast as possible. But also, these can't all be priorities, right? Like, you cannot try to minimize cost while also saying choose the very best method and the very best quality and build me this beautifully documented pipeline that is completely reusable and reproducible. Like that takes time and time costs money, right? So it's a tension between all of these things. Having a conversation ahead of time with the collaborator is what of these is the most important to you? And I will make that my top priority. And certainly I want all of these things, right? Like it's not like I'm going to be like, oh yeah, like
Intentionally low quality.
yeah, like let me just give you bad data because you want it fast, right? Like that's not our vibe. But um if it is get this back to me as fast and as cheap as possible, I may not do a I may go through one round of quality control tuning instead of the if it was this needs to be the most accurate possible, I may go through 4 rounds of tuning, right? And knowing
Yeah.
what is important to the collaborator.
One round and then probably telling them these are the things that I've noticed that
Yeah.
and here's how you would fix them yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Or the caveats of like, hey, maybe, right? So we've definitely talked about this in other episodes, but um, there are like what you are measuring, how good your data needs to be is very much affected by what your biology question is, right? So if the question is my protein, my GFP labeled protein in the nucleus or the cytoplasm, right? That's a really, really different question than what is the, gradient of distribution throughout the cytoplasm, and does that change, like is the ratio of stuff that is perinuclear different than the stuff that is, close to the cell border, right? Like for the second question, the latter, you need really, really careful nuclear and cellular segmentation. You need to know you are measuring like exactly the protein in exactly the components of the cell that you think it is. But if the question is nuclear or cytoplasmic, that's a heck of a lot easier and requires a heck of a lot less tuning. So maybe your biological question doesn't actually need the most perfect segmentation ever existing. Like maybe it is actually totally valid to just find the nucleus and a ring around it. Maybe that's fine. Maybe it's not. And that, again, is a part of all of the expectation setting that happens earlier. Um, and here, so we have this ideal of here's this like tension of the five main thing, but that's really not even it, right? There's so many other things that come into the tensions, the push and pulls, and um, maybe one of these is actually the priority. There are so many things to think about. And so just setting expectations with a collaborator, having the conversation like, what is your top priority for this? So we can optimize that. And, it may affect our ability to do other things. Um, Finally, here about expectations, setting some expectations about backup plans. If if you have these conversations before things go wrong, everybody's
But
usually a
things
lot
never
happier.
go wrong.
Yeah, yeah, right? Like who? Um, if somebody, if the person working on this gets sick and has to be out for a couple weeks, can they hand it off to somebody else in lab, or does it need to be that person? Um, what if it doesn't work? What do we do? What if we can't distinguish between their positive and negative control populations? What if this setup just doesn't produce a biology result that we can interpret or do something with? Like, what do we do about that? When, okay, things have gone off the rail. I got sick for 2 weeks and nobody else could work on it. So we can't hit our timeline. What will that look like if we can't hit the timeline that we thought we could? We didn't anticipate Erin getting pneumonia. Um, how? Okay, what if the things that we have talked about doesn't work? Do we want to try a whole other workflow, a whole other set of softwares, a whole other XYZ? Or do we say, oh, actually, we learned a thing. We learned that this doesn't work, period. Like that may be an okay outcome, but knowing these backup plans before you have to hit them can be really helpful. Um, and I think the very last thing I wanted to say about expectations, things that are often the hardest conversations to have, but so, so important to have from the very beginning. Credit,
So much harder to have later.
so much worse when it's at the end, like credit and money. So, will this be published? Is that the goal? I mean, one can never know, right? But is the goal publication? And if so, how are we going to be credited? What do we expect? Do we expect to have authorship on this because of the intellectual, intellectual work we have done? Or do we think, hey, we'd used some tools we already had, like an acknowledgement is plenty. Thank you for acknowledging us. But as a core facility, it's super important that we do get credit. And but setting expectations in advance of whether this is something that we feel merits authorship, or even saying like reminding people we do need to be acknowledged. And here is how you can acknowledge our work directly in acknowledgments. Please use this phrase so that we can track this and we can show to others the hard work that we do as a core facility, and prove that we are worth supporting. Likewise, money sucks. Nobody likes talking about money, but it's really important to set very clearly in advance who is paying, how much can be paid, how is that going to be paid, and what is actually covered. Because again, things, they might come back a year later and be like, oh, we're ready to publish. And can you remake figure four? And actually, can you write the methods section again? And oh, now we need supplementary five, right? That can actually eat up a lot of time. So knowing in it, setting from the very beginning, like, yes, we will help you with your paper, but also when that happens, we will be charging you. Or that can be set up from the beginning of like, we'll hand you back the data and we're just really excited. We have the bandwidth. We're excited to help you with this publication. We won't charge you for that component because we can factor that into our operating costs of getting the publication. That may look different at different times, depending on funding, depending on personnel, depending on our relationship with the lab that we're collaborating with. But it's really important and hard, but important to set this up from the very beginning. So
Yeah.
that is what I have to say about working with collaborators and setting expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it just all comes down to communication, right? And res like mutual respect and mutual communication. And those are some great guidelines for how to, in practice, think about that so that everybody comes out of a collaboration feeling good about it, as opposed to feeling, mistreated or misunderstood.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Yeah, my pleasure. Hope
Can't wait
this
for the next bit.
Yes, there's more, coming up. We've got in the series, we've got some tools we use to help us with collaborations. And I have a whole bit on dealing with difficult collaborations. So, triggered some balloons there with that. So stay tuned.
Hey, figuring out how to deal with difficult collaborators is worthy of balloons.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Talk to you
Thank
later.
you. Bye.